es nuestro canto. Thank you.
Welcome, bienvenidos, bienvenidas todos a este lugar. My name is Vimari Cuberquier Cruz. Everybody calls me Vima, and that's okay, because I don't want to make anybody's life complicated. I serve at the Lutheran School of Theology as the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. I also lead the efforts of the Anti-Racism Transformation Team and coordinate services with the international students. I also serve as CRLN board, and it's a pleasure for me to be here this evening and to be your MC on this evening. Now I am going to introduce Reverend Juan Angel Gutierrez. Reverend Juan Angel Gutierrez, I'm gonna read a little bit of his bio. He is a proud Puerto Rican. Reverend Gutierrez is an ordained minister of the Chicago Baptist Association and the Baptist churches in Puerto Rico. He served as pastor in Aurora and Chicago, Illinois, and in Carolina and Santurce, Puerto Rico. He served as a student chaplain at the Ohio State University and at Cook County Hospital in Chicago. He worked for Amnesty International Puerto Rico, the House of Representatives, and the Senate of Puerto Rico and the Electoral Commission Board, and served as an organizer for the Workers' Justice Project in New York City. He belongs to the board of the Mesa de Diálogo Martin Luther King Jr., the Puerto Rico Human Rights Committee, and is a part of a human rights observer group for the Puerto Rico Lawyers Guild. He's also a member of CRLN board, and I will introduce him and let him to lead us in a word of prayer.
Welcome, I'm happy to see all of you being part of this important event in the life of CRLN. I have been commissioned to pray, and that's something that I like to do. And I welcome anyone who wants to stand. You can stand, you can stay seated, whatever you want to do. You are free to do it, and I'm going to lead us in prayer at this moment. Creator and mother of all creation, life giver and sustainer, we gather as your people, as people committed to be and work for justice, peace, and reconciliation. We are people with hopes and dreams of a new creation and new relationships based on solidarity, love, and inclusion. We come together because we want to share our hopes and dreams with each other. I mean, at our differences, but in the hope that
okay, dear, that's what I wanted to know. Real good.
The beginning of a new society.
Bye-bye. All right.
We thank you for this opportunity to be together. We ask you, Mother and Father of all creation, life giver and sustainer, that you bless our time together, that this time fill us with joy in our spirits, wisdom in our mind, and love in our hearts. And above all, the strength and passion to keep doing the work of justice and peace that you have put forward to us. Amen. Madre y Padre de toda la creación, dador y sustentador de la vida. Nos reunimos como tu pueblo, un pueblo comprometido en ser y trabajar por la paz, la justicia y la reconciliación. Somos personas con esperanzas y sueños de una nueva creación y relaciones basadas en la solidaridad, el amor y la inclusión. Nos reunimos porque deseamos compartir nuestras esperanzas y sueños los unos con los otros y las otras en medio de nuestras diferencias, en la esperanza de que nuestro trabajo juntos sea el principio de una nueva creación. Damos gracias por la oportunidad de estar juntos y juntas. Te pedimos, Padre y Madre, dador y sustentador de la vida, que bendigas nuestro tiempo juntos y juntas, que este tiempo nos llene de alegría en nuestros espíritus, sabiduría en nuestras mentes y amor en nuestro corazón. Sobre todo, danos fortaleza y pasión para continuar haciendo el trabajo de justicia y paz que has puesto delante de nosotros y nosotras. Amén.
And now it's a privilege for me to introduce the executive director of CRLN, Claudia Lucero. Claudia Lucero is a longtime community organizer in the Chicago area. Prior to serving as the executive director of CRLN, she worked with the Office of Latin American Studies at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, as civic engagement coordinator, and at the University of Illinois at Chicago at the Latino Cultural Center. Claudia was one of the National Alliance of Latin American and Caribbean Communities, now Alianza America's first employees, working as a regional coordinator for the Midwest. She has also worked as the leadership program coordinator for CONFEMEX, the Confederation of Mexican Federations. For the last 10 years, Claudia has been a member of Durango Unido in Chicago, one of the federations in the Chicago area. She has also served as president of Durango Unido in Chicago and CONFEMEX. Claudia was born in Durango, Mexico, and immigrated to the United States in 1990 at the age of 17. She holds a bachelor's degree in Latin American Studies from the University of Illinois at Chicago. In 2006, she received the Top 40 Award from the Red Eye, a publication of the Chicago Tribune newspaper, for being one of the prominent leaders during the 2006 mega marches for immigrants' rights. And it's a blessing and it's an honor for us to have Claudia serving as a executive director for CRLN for how long now, Claudia? 6 years, coming in.
Good evening, everyone. How are you all doing? Okay, well, welcome to University Church. And welcome as well to all our members, allies, and friends who are at home via Zoom. Thank you so much for making that effort as well to join us today. It is an honor to be with you all today, celebrating our 2022 CRLN annual event. Weaving utopias, hopes, and dreams. Tejiendo utopías, esperanzas, y sueños. And yes, we are, again, one more year facing the health issues that will still have to be facing, and is bringing us not only the challenge, but also the opportunities to change the way we do events. And this is our first actually hybrid event. We have you here in person, but also we have members and friends at home watching and being with us. That's unfortunately, we still have to do some work, technological work, that in a way that whoever we're here physically will be able to see the people who are at home through the screen. But those are the things that we still have to be learning along the way. CRLN has a long history of solidarity, advocacy, and organizing work around human rights issues here in Chicago and Latin America, but Cuba as well. As our mission says, we work together through public policy, advocacy, and direct action to dismantle US militarism, neoliberal economies, and immigration policy, and other forms of institutional violence. At CRLN, we have been fortunate to meet and work with Cuban faith leaders since 1996, when Reverend Raimundo Garcia, a Cuban Presbyterian pastor from Cardenas, Cuba, addressed CRLN's membership luncheon. Do you guys remember those luncheon at Old St. Pat's? He called upon us to visit Cuba in order to break the isolation between our two peoples, to promote dialogue about US-Cuba relations, and to experience firsthand the impact of the US embargo of Cuba. Our support, solidarity, and work around to lift the embargo on the island were crucial and continues to be. I also want to thank Reverend Izett Samá, our keynote speaker, that unfortunately she couldn't be with us today because of the same issues and the same political challenges that we facing with Cuba. In order for her to be here with us physically, she had to leave the island and go to the closest third country, in this case was Mexico, to petition for her visa. And unfortunately, Mexico backlog embassy, the US Embassy in Mexico has a backlog of more than a year. So it was completely impossible for her to be with us this year. Hopefully that she can, that we can work around and she can be with us in the future. And I wanted to say thank you to her and to the Center Martin Luther King, because of the efforts that they put together to put together a presentation video for us. And we're gonna connect her via WhatsApp. I'm not sure if she's connected right now, but eventually she will, for an opportunity for us to chat briefly to her via WhatsApp, okay? And hopefully I can meet Izett in the future, either here or in Cuba. At this moment, I also wanted to take a minute to introduce, to recognize once again my board. Bimaria already mentioned all of you, and I wanted to ask you to please stand up. Board members. We're missing two, Leslie and Lydia. Leslie, she has other commitments on Sunday. She's a pastor, and Lydia is dealing with COVID. I believe his partner is dealing with that. So, and I'm sure probably she's online. Thank you, Lydia. And I wanted to say thank you so much for your support and commitment that you have with CRLN to this great family. And thank you for being here with me and walking along with me to make CRLN a great organization and the great work that we do. I also want to recognize and say thank you to my team, Juan Carlos, who is back there, Evelyn, that probably she's running around somewhere, and Marilyn, who was at the registration table. I'm not sure if she's still there or also running around somewhere with all the logistics and preparing our delicious, so we can have our delicious dinner. And Jonathan Gomez, also some of you already met him, but unfortunately he got positive of COVID, and so he had to stay home. And to all of them who are at home dealing with this situation of the COVID, I mean, my best wishes and full recovery to all. And I had to say that without the members of my team, none of this will be possible. Without their time and commitment and hard work, this wouldn't be, I mean, we wouldn't be here. I'm so grateful to have such a great team. I also want to thank to the sponsors of this event. We have the levels of support. We have an anonymous sponsor. For community, Martha and Dennis Pierce, Sydney Hollander and Kate Bergson. For friendship, Sharon and Dan Hunter-Smith, Sisters of Charity, Carol Thompson, Interfaith Community for Detained Immigrants, ICDI. For family, Mary and Bob Nasker. For fellowship, Holy Spirit Missionary Sisters, Dandale and Nancy Jones, Jose Trinidad and Mary McCann Sanchez. For peacemaking, Linda Itzwood, Linda and Norman Grenzinger, Kathleen Osberger, Frank Schneider, and Dick Simpson. Thank you so much for all sponsors as well for this year. Thank you so much. And finally, I wanted to say thank you to all of you. And also the ones who are at home, thank you so much. Thank you to all our members, allies, partners, for your continuous support and commitment to CRLN. Thank you so much. And I want to be a big of applause. Well, this year, as usual, we have the opportunity to honor. And this year, we have two persons that we want to honor, and one of them, the first, Reverend Dandale. I'm sure that most of you, or probably all of you, know him. Until about 6 months ago, he was also one of our board members of CRLN. And then, I don't want to read his whole bio. And you have it in your programs, but I wanted to say a few things about Dan. He's a lifelong fighter for justice and peace in our world. And the people who know him, you probably know these things better about him. He was one of the founders of the Sanctuary Movement in Chicago during the 1980s. He helped to inspire members of local congregations to open their sacred spaces, buildings, and communities to those fleeing persecution and danger from El Salvador, Guatemala during the Civil War. He in the late 1980s, Dan and his wife Nancy and their daughters Jenny and Lucy put their commitment into action, and they moved to El Salvador. And they were serving as United Church of Christ, as a volunteers, and they were helping the people in El Salvador. Because of their work they were doing and because how outspoken is Dan, well, according to the Salvadoran government, they get in trouble and they were about to get deported. And CRLN did a lot of work around that, along with Dan, to working with public officials for this not to happen and to advocate with the El Salvadoran government of the importance of doing the great work that Dan was doing back then, along with his family. I have a friend that many years ago, I remember she was telling me, you had to meet Reverend Dan Dale, and you have to meet him, and you have to meet him. I was like, okay, well. And I think it was probably 10 or 12 years after when I joined this great family, when I met him. And I can see what my friend was telling me, like, you have to meet him. But yeah, he's a great man. He's a great fighter in the social justice. So, and this year we honored Dan. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us physically, but he's via Zoom. So I'm guessing our IT crew is getting ready so we can hear about some words from Dan Dale.
Hello, good afternoon. Can folks hear me? Hello. Well, I thank you very much, CRLN, for this recognition. Decades seem to go by, and I guess I've become an elder of CRLN, a keeper of stories and one who helps us remember our history as we continue forward in la lucha. Gracias a CRLN por ese reconocimiento. Y bueno, supongo yo que soy anciano ahora, parte de la comunidad de CRLN. Excuse me, I'm going to continue in English because my daughters always quejar que hablo español como inmigrante. Entonces voy a seguir en inglés. CRLN grew out of the Chicago Sanctuary Alliance, which was organized by the Chicago Religious Task Force on Central America, of which I was the staff person given the task of organizing the first sanctuary congregations. And I was a part of the group that hired Gary Cosette as the staff person for the Sanctuary Alliance when he returned from his human rights years working in El Salvador right before my family and I moved to El Salvador for the last 5 years of the war. And as Claudia just said, when we were in El Salvador, Gary organized CRLN with CSpace out of the Sanctuary Alliance to coordinate the solidarity work in Chicago for Central America within the religious community. And CRLN's first campaign was to stop the deportation of my family and myself from El Salvador and to help us get permanent residency status. And thanks to CRLN, we were able to remain in El Salvador until after the peace accords. And since we returned to Chicago in 1992, CRLN has been the organization through which we have continued our solidarity work with Latin America. And I must say, it is not easy living solidarity in the belly of the beast, in the heart of the empire. One needs community and comrades in the struggle to dismantle the empire from the inside and to create space of solidarity so that people, the peoples of Latin America, have space to decide their own destinies, space for self-determination. And CRLN has been that community of comrades in the halls of Congress and in the streets. Direct action, civil disobedience, political education, organizing, delegations to Latin America to accompany communities in resistance, and building relationships with our partners. What a gift CRLN has been in my life and the life of my family. I will continue to be a part of CRLN in our common struggle against imperialism, militarism, capitalism, to dismantle all forms of oppression as we live into a new world, a world of solidarity, of justice for the planet and the people. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Dan. And we have this to present to you, so we're gonna keep it in office. So when you come back, so we can hand it to you, I'm gonna read it to everybody. It's a certificate of appreciation. This certificate is presented to 6th day of November 2022 to Dan Dale in grateful recognition of his many years of faithful service to the Chicago Religious Leadership Network in Latin America. We celebrate and give thanks to Dan's dedication to the vision of peace with justice for all in the Americas, for his active involvement in efforts to support and accompany the people's efforts to promote sustainable economies, just relationships, and human dignity. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to invite to come up front Margot Worfolk. Margot, please. Margot has committed her life to working for peace with justice for all God's children, especially those who were left out and pushed out by injustice, political and economic systems. In 2000, CRLN was having a delegation to El Salvador for marking the 20th anniversary of the assassination of Monsignor Oscar Romero. And there, Margot was there. And during that time, she fell in love with the courage Salvadoran people and their struggle for justice. She also fell in love with Joe Houston, who physically is not with us anymore, but he's in the spirit, and his legacy as well. Margot and Joe, they continue their work for their fighting for social justice for our communities here and El Salvador as well. I remember Margot, she was my first boss. When I joined CRLN family, she was the board chair. And she remembered every day, every year, the day when I started. Thank you, Margot. And it was my pleasure working with her. She's a wonderful woman. She's a woman who cares for the other. And Margot, it's my honor to present to you a certificate of appreciation for all those years of work and commitment. And your heart is with CRLN. Thank you, Margot.
She wanted to know if I say a few words, but I think everybody's been said. Can you hear me? Okay. It is with heartfelt gratitude that I accept this honor. And knowing, however, that if I am not here or wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for Gary Cosette. Now, I think you people know who Gary Cosette is, most of you, and was certainly part of working in the development of CRLN. And so what happened was I was in a time in my own life when I was kind of floating around, not quite knowing where I might end up after working in parishes and that kind of ministry that I did. So I was sort of looking for what would be the next, way and path of my life. And somehow there was some kind of a paper, maybe in a magazine, that had this article that Gary Cosette was going to take a group to El Salvador for the 20th anniversary of Archbishop Romero. Now, not the Archbishop, but the saint. And I thought, hey, that sounds pretty good. I'd like to do it. So I went. And Gary had lived in El Salvador for 3 years. And so he certainly knew all about what was happening and the people and how they were reacting to the end of the Civil War and moving forward on that. And so what he did for me was opened up. It was like broke open my awareness of El Salvador and the people there, because he knew so much. We walked around, we saw most places where Civil War had taken place. The people there, it was just so much for me in that one visit to El Salvador that my life had been transformed and has been transformed by that visit, that first visit to El Salvador. So that's why I'm here, because of Gary Cosette. And also, 2 years after that time, I was also, my husband wasn't my husband at the time, but just like I fell in love with El Salvador, my husband fell in love with me, and whoa, okay. So at that point, we got married there, and he also worked very diligently with another group called CEAS, and that was with Leslie Chauve, who was the director there. And Joe worked very diligently down there with Leslie, and also back in the States when he was on a board again for the CIS. And so both of us fell in love with El Salvador. And that has always been with me. And as I said, I learned so much. And I was just so, I don't want to say broken, but just broken open in my awareness of what Salvador and the people of the Central America, what their life was, and the wonders of the people was so special. And so we continued to work there, as well as also I joining CRLN at that time, and Joe was also with the other CEAS. So I just want you to know that, how much that it was so transformative in being right there and being with people who just are so much a part of the world, but in a way in which we don't see the fullness of that as well. I think that somebody has spoken or talked about solidarity. And I often think in my life, that she's an old lady, me, because I wasn't using the word solidarity. Now, I go back a long time. And so I learned from CRLN, I learned from the people of El Salvador what solidarity means. And that to me was a great, again, something that I learned, something that I cherish, something that was so much a part of my time and life in working with CRLN and El Salvador. So that was one thing that I learned about that. And the other one is, I think, a word we all hear, and I think a lot of what Dan has said, he said it a little bit different, but fire in the belly is my word. And I've used that word when I was even in ministry to kind of get people to, you know, fire in the belly, fire in the belly. And I would come home and think, I can't figure out what that is. I don't have any fire in my belly. And for years, trying to figure out why I don't have fire in the belly. Well, lo and behold, I think today, getting this award has now given me that I do have fire in the belly. And I'm so grateful that this helped me to learn that I do have fire in the belly. So I'm very grateful for that. And I was going to also talk about Dan, if that's okay, but he said a lot. But I would also like to acknowledge Dan Dale, as you all heard, because it was Dan, who was learned from him, but he was always in my eyes. He was truly a leader, and I think you know, all of you who know him know that. And but he gave me, you know, confidence and courage, and so that I would need to also learn and teach and fight for those who were deprived of the basic human rights. And so I want to say a thank you to Dan for that part in my life. And I'd like to do that by saying, Dan, that's his symbol, that's Dan. So how much, again, a person like that having that impact in my life and helped me to move forward in this. So I truly thank him for that. We have here, you know, we have the people that are on the board. We have people that are on the other board, not a board, but on the staff. And we also have people who are members of CRLN. And I want to thank you to those people that I have worked with for your inspiration, so much inspiration for me, guidance and kinship with the group that I worked with at CRLN and over the past 20 years. It is because of our solidarity, and now I know what solidarity is in its many forms, and it's dedicated to the mission that I am here today. I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you for your part in CRLN, and I'm very grateful to them, to CRLN, and to the people that continue to broaden and to work with the people that so much need that CRLN can broaden out. So thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
I wanted to say one more time, thank you to Margot and Dan, and let's give a big applause. Now, I wanted to invite our board chair, Linda Itzwood, to come up front, and she's gonna be doing one of the most important. She has a very important role in the event, and thank you, Linda. And the microphone is yours.
Good afternoon, all. Greetings Hi. The moment you've all been waiting for, the ask. And I know that many of you have already given generously to CRLN, but you know, as I know, that for those of you who can, we could always do with a bit more. So for those of you who don't need any further prompting, a reminder that you can go straight to scanning the QR code that you'll find on this card or in various places in your program. Or you can go online to crln.org or to the bit.ly address on here and give there. Or for those of you watching online or who want to write in here, you can pledge an amount with your name and the amount, and we can follow up with you. But I'd really like to tell you a bit more about why we're asking. And as most of you know, CRLN continues to be very active in advocacy for fair and just policy on Latin America, always with the guidance of partners on the ground. We're also active in issues of immigration in both advocacy and direct support for immigrants seeking safety and asylum in the US, including, by the way, 2 asylum seekers housed right now upstairs in this church. There are so many aspects of CRLN's work that I could focus on, but for today, let's focus on Cuba. So we've already heard that CRLN's links go back to 1996. My own personal links to Cuba in actually a different context go back to the year 2000. And to follow up on the comments we just heard, that visit to Cuba was probably where I first learned the meaning of solidarity. I went down with a group that planned to do all these things to help and came away learning that what was wanted was friendship and solidarity. Was an important lesson. So CRLN, trips to Cuba have happened, my own trips to Cuba have happened. As one example of the embargo, we've seen firsthand the severe lack of medicines. You may know that Cuban doctors are really well trained, but without supplies, their treatments are limited. I, by the way, was once sick when I was in Cuba, and I realized how much it meant that people were bringing me medicine, because medicine in Cuba is like gold dust. So I have really received generosity beyond generosity. The embargo that the US imposes on Cuba has met some of its explicit goals. So in 1960, officials of the US State Department wrote of their goal to bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow of the government. Hunger and desperation? Yes. Overthrow of the government? No, even after 60 plus years. And the US embargo has even helped Cuba's leaders, as I saw when I was there, by providing the perfect excuse when there are shortages of anything, whatever the underlying cause. The embargo has been condemned by many Cuban, US, and international religious and secular bodies. Just this last Thursday, some of you may have seen, the UN General Assembly voted 185 to 2 to condemn the US embargo of Cuba for the 30th year in a row. Be inspired by what we'll soon be hearing from Reverend Izett Samá Hernández. I have met the Reverend Izett. She is absolutely a live wire. I know we're going to enjoy what she has to tell us, even as some of it may be not so happy. So CRLN will continue to work to finally end the US embargo. Please support us in that work. So once again, if you can, QR code, website, pledge, written pledge, put it in the chat. However much or little you can give, we'll put it to work, and we are grateful for your support. Thank you.
Now, as we continue the program, we want to hear from Marilyn, as she will be introducing our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Vima, Linda, and everyone in this great program. I just want to look back for just a second. You know, CRLN began working to end the embargo based on the invitation of a Presbyterian pastor in 1996. He came to the luncheon and was appealing to people of faith to travel to Cuba to see what was really happening in Cuba as a result of US policy. So US policy over many years, we just have to say, has, as Linda pointed out, is aimed at regime change. And what makes it worse is that there's a constant repetition of how we are limiting people's access to food and medicine because we want to help them. So all of these measures, even, you know, up through the most current president, is wrapped in this helping package. We know because this program, as well as all of CRLN's programs, is based on hearing from people who experience these policies, whether it's in Cuba, El Salvador, Colombia. So starting with hearing from Pastor Raimundo Garcia, we started traveling to Cuba to talk to Cubans firsthand, because it's very hard to really get the Cubans' point of view. There's so many trees killed about people like us and our view of the future of Cuba. Well, believe it or not, they have an idea about their future. Guess what? And it's one of their making. So we tried to develop a program that would enable us to understand these effects and then began serious advocacy to change these policies. So the Martin Luther King Center hosted our original delegations and opened up experiences using popular education methodology where we were able to have experiences in Cuba that you don't have, you know, going to the beach. So the center played a huge role in our development, our being able to have experiences that we could then share with legislators. So you'll be surprised maybe to learn that 20 years ago, we invited Reverend Raul Suarez to be our luncheon speaker. And he did not receive a visa because he was considered too dangerous a person to be allowed into the US. So now the center in this intervening time is continuing to develop transformative experiences for people like us. But as you'll see in your program and hear from Pastor Izett, have a deep analysis of their role in Cuba, the vision they have for Cuba. And that's what we invited Izett here to share with you, because that is just the story that we never hear, you know, their picture of their future. So we started months ago trying to get a visa for her, but one of the final acts of the Trump administration was to put Cuba on the state-sponsored terrorist nations list, and make it so that every Cuban had to go to a third country to apply for a visa. So this produces an astonishingly expensive and time-consuming process. And after working on it for months, we had to say that we would go to Plan B, which was to use our pandemic skills and invite Izett to be with us virtually tonight. So we are going to continue to try to bring her, and eventually we will be able to. but because she is an amazing person. Other people may have met her as well. She started out training, as you'll see in her bio. She first became a nurse. Then she went to the seminary. In the seminary, she wrote some really foundational pieces about the role of race in her denomination. She's gone on to become, you know, we could have like 8 programs with her different hats. So she wears a big hat as a theologian, particularly in the African-based religions and that thought, as well as being very active. She's a Presbyterian pastor to a church. She also is extremely active in the Presbyterian leadership in Cuba. She serves on, you know, several international bodies. So she is just a person full of abilities. So what we, you know, miss most is obviously not being able to be with her, but she has so much to share with us. And I am just honored that she can be with us. And if people have any troubles with, we have captioned her video to us. And if there are any issues with it, we are recording tonight so that everybody can have a link to tonight's event to view and share with others. So I want to, let's give a big hand to Izett, who is standing by in Cuba. And after the, while people are eating, she's available for us to call her on WhatsApp. I'll have a computer in the back of the room, and you can bring your food back into church and ask Izett questions. And she's very willing to answer anything. The other way that we're using our knowledge is people will have seen stickers at the front that says, "Ask me about my trip to Cuba." So if you missed that and you want to talk about Cuba, please put one of those on as a conversation starter. I also want to thank Dr. Christina Perez, who joined the program to help us round out our Cuba experience, having just returned from Cuba. So without further ado, let's hear from Izett. Thank you.
Hola, reciban un saludo desde el Centro Martin Luther King en La Habana, Cuba, y con este saludo también de gratitud por todos los años que hemos compartido en hermandad y también en solidaridad. Nuestro centro durante este año está cumpliendo los 35 años y con esto significa que han sido 35 años de trabajo dentro y fuera de Cuba. Después de estos 35 años estamos cosechando el resultado de nuestra principal acción, que es la formación en educación popular, en lectura popular de la Biblia, con fundamentos de la teología de la liberación. Actualmente el Centro Martin Luther King está trabajando en 5 programas o 5 procesos, con los cuales estamos intentando llevar lo que desde la experiencia de la educación popular hemos aprendido, y es a tener una formación ética, política, pedagógica, que ayude a las personas a ser sujetos, a ser protagonistas de la transformación de la sociedad. Nuestro centro hoy tiene el privilegio de acompañar a lo largo del país 2 redes, la red Educadoras y Educadores Populares y la red Ecuménica Fe por Cuba. Con estas redes nosotros llevamos a todas las provincias del país nuestra propuesta formativa, que intenta desde la educación popular también permitir que las personas se organicen a nivel comunitario para la transformación social. De la misma manera, la red Ecuménica Fe por Cuba intenta buscar alternativas para que las iglesias cubanas también tengan una transformación en su pastoral, y desde las iglesias podamos desarrollar programas sociales que contribuyan a la transformación de nuestro país. De la misma manera, Cuba es el escenario principal de nuestras acciones, pero también desde el programa de solidaridad nosotros estamos trabajando con América Latina y con los Estados Unidos. El objetivo con América Latina es también, desde nuestra visión, desde nuestra propuesta pedagógica, formativa de la educación popular, llegar a organizaciones, llegar a movimientos sociales. Actualmente también estamos trabajando con algunos partidos desde la propuesta de organizar la formación en la base, en las comunidades. De igual manera, trabajamos con algunas escuelas, trabajamos también llevando personas de nuestro centro a formarse a otros lugares y también trabajamos en todos los procesos de integración que actualmente tiene América Latina. Con los Estados Unidos también trabajamos sobre todo propiciando el intercambio con personas que vienen de los Estados Unidos para que conozcan nuestro país, para que conozcan la realidad de nuestro país desde su propia experiencia y no lo que escuchan o no lo que ven. Y con esto también queremos sensibilizar al público norteamericano para que incida y que el gobierno de los Estados Unidos cambie su política hostil contra nuestro país. En los últimos tiempos hemos estado muy enfrascados en formar formadores, en formar personas para que puedan, dentro y fuera de Cuba, llevar esta experiencia de la educación popular a muchos lugares. Ha sido reconocido el esfuerzo de nuestro centro y en los últimos tiempos se nos ha pedido que también podamos formar a los servidores públicos, a funcionarios del gobierno, del partido, a los delegados del Poder Popular, a las personas que ejercen su responsabilidad como servidores del pueblo, como servidores públicos. Y en eso estamos enfrascados actualmente, en formar personas que puedan cambiar la manera en que en Cuba se hace política. Tenemos muchos educadores y educadoras populares formados por nuestro centro que hoy están ocupando responsabilidades en varios sectores, dentro de la estructura de gobierno de nuestro país, y eso nos ayuda a que haya visiones diferentes en la manera de ejercer la política. Nuestro énfasis es en la participación. Queremos que para participar hay que poder, hay que saber y hay que querer. Si la gente quiere participar, si la gente puede participar, entonces la gente tiene que saber cómo hacerlo. Y esa es una de las experiencias que estamos queriendo también llevar en Cuba a todos los lugares a los cuales podamos llegar. Hemos tenido la experiencia recientemente con el Código de las Familias, que la labor formativa que hizo el centro fue vital para que muchas personas se sensibilizaran y entendieran realmente la importancia del Código Nuevo de Familia en términos de derechos. Entonces, creemos que es crucial formar, creemos que es crucial que la gente aprenda a participar, a velar por sus derechos, a velar por la responsabilidad social. También recientemente terminamos la 4ª edición de la Escuela Latinoamericana de Formación Política, y esto también es el resultado del reconocimiento que tiene el centro en América Latina en su formación, con personas de 52 de muchos países, de 13 diferentes organizaciones sociales. Hemos podido formar un grupo de líderes que van a continuar ese trabajo de formación en la base de sus organizaciones. América Latina está necesitando que nos volquemos a las bases, que regresemos a las bases, a las comunidades, que eduquemos a las personas del pueblo cuál es la verdadera democracia, que los eduquemos en la participación, que no se dejen engañar por las manipulaciones mediáticas o por las manipulaciones de gobiernos antidemocráticos que intentan apoderarse de América Latina. Y nosotros queremos contribuir en muchos sentidos a eso. Creo que en este tiempo nos ha permitido percatarnos de que tenemos un valor esencial en la formación y que tenemos que continuar trabajando para que cada vez sean más los formadores, las personas formadas, que puedan incidir en las comunidades dentro y fuera de Cuba para la transformación social. Con el público de los Estados Unidos tenemos un arduo trabajo de sensibilización, como les decía antes, no solo recibiendo delegaciones que le preparamos programas particulares específicos, sino que estamos también queriendo que el público americano norteamericano se abra a la educación popular, a la necesidad de la formación política, a encontrar en los jóvenes que están ahora buscando también ser líderes políticos las mejores formas de participar, de conocer, de llegar a las comunidades, y nosotros también estamos queriendo trabajar en esto. Tenemos muchos sueños como centro, estamos en un nuevo tiempo también con un equipo joven que ha crecido, pero un equipo también que ve el centro como un proyecto de vida, como un proyecto de lucha política, y tenemos la responsabilidad de desde nuestro centro salgan al menos matices de esperanza para nuestro país. Todo lo que promovemos tiene que ver con la justicia, con los derechos, lo promovemos desde los fundamentos bíblicos, pero también de los fundamentos éticos de luchadores que nos han antecedido. Es por esa razón que apoyamos y participamos en todas las expresiones que haya en Cuba y fuera de Cuba a favor de los derechos raciales, de los derechos de la justicia de género, de la justicia pues, por la orientación sexual, o sea, todo lo que incida en los derechos de las personas. Estamos nosotros también formando a todas las personas con las cuales trabajamos para esto. La formación es el valor esencial, es la acción esencial, pero también lo hacemos desde la comunicación, también lo hacemos intentando vivir en el centro lo mismo que nosotros estamos queriendo vivir en la sociedad. Estamos invitando también a todas las personas que durante mucho tiempo han tenido con nosotros expresiones de solidaridad y de amistad a continuar buscando maneras de seguir construyendo juntos, de colaborar juntos, porque después de la COVID el mundo nos ha demostrado que la única manera que tenemos de enfrentar la dominación y los poderes es juntando todas las personas de buena voluntad que podamos tener una acción concreta, un impacto concreto en la vida de las personas que más lo están necesitando. El centro tiene una nueva estructura, tiene una nueva dirección, pero tiene los mismos cimientos, los mismos fundamentos, y vamos a continuar trabajando para que desde nuestro centro también salgan las mejores expresiones de justicia, de solidaridad que necesita el pueblo de Cuba, pero que también necesitan los pueblos del mundo. Muchas gracias.
Pastor Izett, thank you for such a powerful presentation. We are with you. Estamos contigo. Gracias por tan poderosa presentación. A la pastora Izett. Christina.
Thanks so much. I'm so sorry Lisette isn't here, but I'm incredibly honored to be part of the program today. When I was a teenager, the Chicago Religious Leadership, the Chicago Religious Leadership Network, Central America, was a great influence on me. And particularly, I can think about Rennie Golden, I can think about Marianne Corley and some of the people. I met Dan Dale and Gary Cosette in El Salvador, I believe in '94, at one of the election observations organized by the CIS. I remember Margot and Joe very clearly. I think, Margot, I might have met you at the 2005 25th commemoration of Oscar Romero's death. So it's a very big honor for me to be here on a day when they are being honored. I was in Cuba last August. The key word that everybody repeated over and over again was scarcity. People talked about scarcity, the lines, and struggle. The scarcity is profound. And that's something in a country who has suffered over 60 years of economic embargo while recovering from the economic crisis of the 90s, the special period. The Trump-Biden policy is harming the Cuban population in new and cruel ways. As others have mentioned, the intent of this policy is to destroy the Cuban Revolution by creating conditions for uprising or migration. Make the people suffer from lack of food, from lack of medicine, from lack of electricity, which also means no water, the very basics of contemporary life. Destabilize the government and turn the people against the revolution. Since 1962, this policy has been a failure. How many US presidents? 13. President Obama, the 11th, who has been in power in the US since the Cuban Revolution, recognized that this policy was a failure. 2014 and 2016 was a time of hope for many people on the island. Finally, a path towards normalization and all sorts of new opportunities for economic growth and cultural exchange. Then came the Trump sanctions of 2017, which restricted remittances and increased hurdles for travel. 2020, these sanctions were made even worse. And worst of all, as Marilyn mentioned, notice the Capitol attack, the 6th of January 2021. What does Trump have time to think about? What does Trump have time to do on the 11th of October 2021, but to put Cuba back on that state terrorism list? And a year into the pandemic, knowing that that would make it harder for Cuba to buy things on the world market. Raising prices of vital products. Last summer, Biden lifted some of these restrictions around remittances and travel, but left the other sanctions in place. These actions in a time of peace would be aggressive, but in a time of pandemic, they are lethal. The Cubans did not suffer from the impact of COVID-19 to the degree that we did here in the United States. Their government took care of them and developed comprehensive public health strategies that were implemented around the country. That included developing vaccines. Cuba developed 5. Yet the blockade blocked Cuba from being able to purchase the syringes and other materials that were necessary to inoculate the population from this fatal disease. The loss of tourism revenue due to the pandemic left the Cuban government with less resources to provide a social safety net. At the same time, increasing numbers of people on the island were made vulnerable due to the pandemic and the war. Shortages and supply chain disruptions hard around the world, even harder in Cuba. These sanctions impact the ability of Cuba to import oil, especially from Venezuela. The strategy of the US government is to turn off the lights, to have the food rot, to rob Cubans of water. Then the price of oil on the world market rises even more due to war. Extreme climate change also impacts access to electricity. And we see this around the world, some populations being impacted by this for the first time. The Cubans have been dealing with this for 60 years. When I was there in August, the fires in Matanzas were still burning. It was 95 degrees with humidity in the day, no electricity. Cool breezes and 70-degree temperatures at night made good sleeping weather. But opening the window was dangerous because of the dengue-bearing mosquitoes that were outside the window. No fans, no air conditioning created a fatal situation in Cuba this summer. And even after this, with all the pressure, the other word I heard in Cuba besides scarcity was hope. This hope was made real just a few weeks ago when the population of Cuba voted to update the family code, recognizing diverse families, perhaps bringing more rights and the most progressive definition of family in the world to the Cubans. It's amazing to see Cuba extend rights, especially as we live in a place where we are losing them. It is amazing to see these rights extended by plebiscite, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. And it was a battle. And the role of the Martin Luther King Center played to counter the campaign of disinformation and lies about gender and sexuality that were spread by the conservative evangelical churches in Cuba in their campaign to stop the expansion of the family code, teaches us about the battle of ideas and the way the revolution continues to grow, evolve, and change. I hope that this historic step continues to open up more progressive policies and processes in Cuba, including increasing rights and protection for trans and non-binary Cubans, to implement plans for updates to comprehensive sex education that have been sitting in the Ministry of Education for a while, to continue to develop a critical race analysis and attack white supremacy and racism in all its forms. There's also hope that the new year will bring improvements, that the world pandemic and economy will stabilize, that more visitors will come and visit Cuba. We are also a part of that hope, that our solidarity with the Cuban people and our resistance to the policies of the US government will end all sanctions to Cuba, get Cuba off the terrorism list, and end the blockade and normalize relations. Que viva Cuba libre.
And now Marilyn is going to lead us in the call to action.
Thank you, Christina. Christina is a wealth of knowledge and she's happy to share it. So she's another person you can quiz during the fun and festivities part of this evening. And Christina, I remember years ago, she was already going to legislative visits with us. And the hardest part was when people said ridiculous things to us in those visits. She had to keep from jumping up and yelling at them, but she did a good job at it. And so she's a long-term advocate as well as a academic leader and a leader of delegations to Cuba. So in the CRLN method, when we learn something, we also take action, because this is not a Latin American studies program. We're actually learning things so that we can change US policy. So everybody got this piece of paper and in their little envelope of treasures, and it's called, on one side it says Cuba is not a sponsor of terror, and the other side it says designate new TPS humanitarian protections for Central Americans. And you might say, how are these things related? Well, when we have destructive policy in countries, it is a factor in forcing people to leave their countries. So more and more we're seeing that all of our programs have a transnational character where these destructive policies push people out, and then they arrive here and people are like really puzzled. Well, why did they come here? So we work on these issues together. So Dr. Perez mentioned that right at the end of Trump's administration, I mentioned it before, he put Cuba back on the state-sponsored list of terrorist nations, even though under Obama, there was a huge review that went on, and the result of it was taken off that list. So it was part of the Trump program, which is to just kind of wreck everything that Obama did about anything. So the problem is that it causes deeper, it makes the blockade even worse because there's all kinds of banking regulations, shipping regulations that come into play when you're on the list of terrorist nations. So there isn't really any basis for it. And it's something that President Biden could, with executive authority, change. So we're coupled with, this particular action was developed by Code Pink, but national church bodies, international church bodies are working on this because it directly affects people's humanitarian work in Cuba in response to the fire in Matanzas in August and the hurricane. So you can read through this detailed list, and you can, on your pledge card, it has a section that says, I want to take action. So if you would like to not have to go to your computer, you could just check the box that says sign me on to the petition to end the sponsorship of, and the listing of Cuba on that terrorist nation list. And then on the other side, TPS is a way that people are protected who flee to this country from the conditions in their country, particularly in Central America. So this is another thing that the administration could do that would really help people because those countries are not in a position to receive people back. And this is an easy way to shelter people when there's terrible conditions in their countries. So you can check the pledge card. You can also, for people who are online, I think Juan Carlos is giving you the links for the online folks, and you can share that with other people. Some of you lucky people, it's kind of like the door prize. You got a beautiful postcard in addition to your action alert. If you would sign that postcard, Juan Carlos is going to Washington this week, and as part of a national campaign, everybody's bringing their signed postcards, as well as assembling all the people who signed on to the petition. So I'll be at the back with a basket to collect those things. And I really would like you to act. I'd like you to share this with others. And we have to take these policies that are carried out in our name, and we have a responsibility to change them however long it takes. Thank you.
So we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work ahead of us, and we have options to continue doing this work. The work of CRLN is done by so many people. But the truth is that without your contributions, without the work that you do, CRLN will not be able to accomplish more. So please share this information. Use those links, those of you who are in the virtual space. Thank you for being there. Share those links. So many people are so well connected these days to social media. Go to our Facebook page or go to our Instagram page and share this information with your contacts. And this is how we build strength, and this is how we do our work more effectively. It has been a great evening. Thank you for being with us. Those of you who have remained in the virtual space, thank you. This is our first hybrid event. It is so good that those of us who are here in person will be able to gather around the table. It is great that those of you who could not join in person gather with us in the virtual space. We will continue doing this work. Y sí se puede. Sí se puede. And to conclude this night, we are going to let here again Ramon to help us with some music as we move from this space, and as we depart from this space, again, we give thanks in all of the names that are holy and sacred, and God, mother, father, friend, lover, companion, for helping us to come together to do this work. So until we see us again next year, virtually, God only knows, in person, hopefully, all of us, thank you for being here. Have a good evening. Take care. Peace.
When I hear Cuba, I always think in revolution. And when I was very young, like 8 years old, I start asking about what is revolution. And in this country, we make the revolution every day, right? We fight for something, like for justice. And Carlos Puebla make a song for Che Guevara. And when I think in revolution, I think in Che Guevara too. Aprendimos a quererte desde la histórica altura, donde el sol de tu bravura le puso cerco a la muerte. Aquí se queda la clara, la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara. Tu mano gloriosa y fuerte desde la historia dispara, cuando todo Santa Clara se despierta para verte. Aquí se queda la clara, la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara. Vienes quemando la brisa con soles de primavera, para plantar la bandera con la luz de tu sonrisa. Aquí se queda la clara, la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara. Tu amor revolucionario te conduce a nueva empresa, donde esperan la firmeza de tu brazo libertario. Aquí se queda la clara, la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara. Seguiremos adelante, como junto a ti seguimos, y con Fidel te decimos, hasta siempre, comandante. Aquí se queda la clara, la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara. Aquí se queda la clara, entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara. Gracias. I'm gonna need your help to sing this song, because especially Eduardo Saborit, he wrote this song in 1959, just when, after the the revolution wins, and he take this song to around the world, and the people was thinking it's el himno de Cuba, but it's not. Then it's easy to sing the chorus. Oye, tú que dices que tu patria no es tan linda. Oye, tú que dices que lo tuyo no es tan bello. Yo te invito a que busques por el mundo otro cielo tan azul como tu cielo. Una luna tan brillante como aquella que se filtra en la dulzura de la caña. Y un Fidel que vibre en la montaña, un rubí, 5 franjas y una estrella. Y un Fidel que vibre en la montaña, un rubí, 5 franjas y una estrella. Cuba, qué linda es Cuba, quien la defiende la quiere más. That's easy, right? Cuba, qué linda es Cuba, quien la defiende la quiere más. Qué linda es Cuba, Cuba, qué linda es Cuba, quien la defiende la quiere más. Qué linda es Cuba, Cuba, qué linda es Cuba, quien la defiende la quiere más. Qué linda es Cuba, Cuba, qué linda es Cuba, quien la defiende la quiere más. ¿Quién te defiende, mi Cuba bella? ¿Quién te defiende, te quiere más? Qué linda es Cuba, Cuba, qué linda es Cuba, quien la defiende la quiere más. Qué linda es Cuba, Cuba, qué linda es Cuba, quien la defiende la quiere más. Ahora el Guajiro vive contento, vive feliz en comunidad. Qué linda es Cuba, Cuba, qué linda es Cuba, quien la defiende la quiere más. Qué linda es Cuba, Cuba, qué linda es Cuba, quien la defiende la quiere más. Y un Fidel que vive en la montaña, un rubí, 5 franjas y una estrella.